Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Those familiar with the Synoptic Gospel of Matthew might find familiarity with this verse that begins chapter 6, the location of the Lord's Prayer, which beckons to those in faith and of belief in a Christian denomination tradition to be led not into temptation, but delivered from evil. Et nos inducas, sed libera nos a malo. Amen. That a providential will might be done upon earth as it is in heaven. Inshallah, as is said in the Islamic faith tradition, or Ezrat Hashem in the Judaic faith tradition. And these are, as it were, generally accepted by those persons of faith, or in faith, as preliminary instructions. But particularly with spycraft emerging in vogue as the flavor of the day in the news, at least those in the intelligence community may also find at least tangential connection to their work, aspiring towards omniscience, even if not ubiquity, nor certainly omnipotence. Or even many a spy thriller aficionado might find intriguing interest when referring perhaps to a character in a Mission Impossible who had been, as they say, disavowed. Very much like the narrative found in the Johannine Gospels that recorded the miraculous healing of the man born blind from birth, this passage definitely suggests some covert conduct, importing images of surreptitious intrigue and work performed, shall we say, out of view, tabula rasa, with potentially serious consequences and repercussions if revealed to the general public. Practically, the very functional definition of something classified as top secret. And our, shall we say, agent is advised, should he choose to accept this mission, therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. A phrase that may suggest persons one might find in electoral politics. And certainly, when conducting business for Her Majesty's Secret Service, whether engaged essentially in internal security and strategic counterintelligence at MI5, or as an international man of mystery like a James Bond Agent 007 at MI6, if only to maintain his or her cover, should utilize, as we say, extreme discretion, were their antics in public view on a campaign trail, hosting rallies, shaking hands, kissing babies, and raising political donations, they might blow their cover. And accordingly, our agent is instructed, but when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, suggesting a perhaps division of labor. Just as in the divisions of labor we find between the operations of MI5 and MI6 in British intelligence. That thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father, which seeth in secret himself, shall reward thee openly, suggesting further perhaps secret compartmented information, needs to know, or matters that might be discussed and worked upon in what is often called a skiff, with the only chief classification authority with the highest need to know actually comprehending how one hand washes the other and how both hands wash the face. We might go on a bit further with how this, shall we say, biblical fable may apply to intelligence work, but this is quite a sufficient sample in case for now. Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for Arlington Public School Board. Currently in the American press, if you have been following the news closely, since at least the beginning of May, is the exploration of a possible laboratory origin of a novel coronavirus, a controversial topic during the last presidential election that became a divisive point between opposing political parties and candidates, with the predominant theme suggesting what has been called a zoonotic origin or evolution by persons professing expertise in the sciences. And certainly the idea that appeared to have been the one that a majority of Americans had accepted to explain a public health crisis that has claimed in the United States alone a total in fatalities exceeding 500,000, a number equivalent to the annual toll worldwide to a common seasonal infection from influenza types A and B. When potential adverse impacts are considered in real politics, it is not far-fetched to surmise that some may require a more, shall we say, palatable understanding of certain labyrinthine and mercurial aspects of the business of international geopolitics, requiring, as Captain Brett Elliott Crozier so aptly stated aboard his crippled nuclear aircraft carrier, a political solution to be handled with extreme discretion, lest we disturb the sleep of the children. So for the next few minutes, assuming we are all adults and possessed with at least a normal intellect and capacity for reason, we shall attempt to explore some of the nuanced phrases in what former Army Surgeon Ralph Northam has described as his biological war, with, how did he say, a highly contagious virus, less than 5% infectious, by validation. You may recall back in June when the focus of the world was on wearing masks and washing hands. Interesting suggestion. A story had appeared in the international press about Sir Richard Dearlove, a former director of MI6, like M, James Bond's boss, who suggested quite diplomatically, stiff upper lip, that the pandemic health crisis may have started as an accident after the novel coronavirus had escaped from the virology lab in Wuhan. Very qualified. Almost immediately, his suggestions were rejected, but not by his former employer at MI6. Separating distance, akin to perhaps the equivalent of a CIA, but by MI5, the domestic counterintelligence agency in the United Kingdom, or the equivalent of the FBI, letting not the right hand know what the left hand was doing, and creating what is often described in law firms as a Chinese curtain, compartmented information, separate but equal in the government. We see several instances of this throughout the COVID crisis. Note the nuance in that Sir Richard Dearlove's opinion is not to be interpreted or taken as the current opinion of his former employer, MI6, the National Security Agency. And he is, at least in appearance, speaking in a private capacity about his considered thoughts, not at all suggesting any intentions nor malice upon the part of the foreign nation connected to the origins of the virus. Very civil, very diplomatic, and only opining that they may have been some wholly explainable accident, like when Dr. Richard Redfield, at the time the director of the CDC, touts his private thoughts that in laboratories working with biohazards, it is not unfathomable that accidents might happen, and that was entirely plausible that the virus had possibly, by that foreseeable and possible avenue, somehow, escaped. An opinion embraced now, well then, by the former president, Donald J. Trump, and lampooned by pundits in the press, as well as what appeared to be practically monolithic agreement in the scientific community that had even endorsed his opponent in the presidential election, Joe Biden. A precarious situation, especially for politicians. And just as in court, persons generally retain attorneys to engage in zealous advocacy upon their behalf, the Beijing government entered the fray and began to position itself as not only blameless, but also strenuously put forth that the pandemic pathogen was not because of their mishandling, the growing consensus in the international community at the time, although far less so in the American electorate, but that it was rather the fault of the United States military, which had participated in joint nation military exercises prior to the emergence of COVID-19 around the Wuhan area. The blame game of pointing fingers rather than pointing towards facts, as we often see in court. And so now, moving closer to an international political solution, as is often the work of those engaged in the profession of diplomacy, not long after the current director for the CDC, Dr. Michal had fumblingly appeared to embrace her predecessor while presenting testimony to the House Intelligence Committee recently. President Biden has now tasked the Director of National Intelligence, DNI, who exercises authority over all of the national security agencies, to include CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, to begin a unified inquiry, monolithic voice among those agencies to form an opinion, an official opinion on the origins of the contagion that emerged in the central mainland of China, a nation that has been repeatedly acknowledged to represent a clear and imminent danger to our national security, and who even Senator Mark Warner has joined with Senator Marco Rubio last December to state that we agree with DNI Ratcliffe that China poses the greatest national security threat to the United States. Our intelligence is clear. The Chinese Communist Party will stop at nothing to exert its global dominance. Beijing's infiltration of U.S. society has been deliberate and insidious, as they use every instrument of influence available to accelerate their rise at America's expense. At least in December, in bipartisan alliance, it was the opinion of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that this is our watershed moment, and we must stand our ground. The United States must not and cannot accept Beijing's quest to exert dominance, while dismissing international legal norms and committing egregious human rights abuses to further their goals. A pretty solid position. However, today in Virginia alone, there have been a total of 675,165 cases of infection associated with 3,568 separate outbreaks, connected to only 76,328 associated cases, very low. But trace contact follow-ups, despite early warnings from the World Health Organization at the end of January 2020 to commence enhancing such a capacity, was long delayed, even in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And by June, State Health Commissioner Mohammed Norman Oliver had only brought on board 168 new hires from over 6,000 resumes to fill a total of 1,300 positions, most requiring only a familiarity with medical terminology, but not even a college degree, compared with the robust and decisive effort commenced by the Beijing government that by February had dispatched 1,800 teams of at least 5 qualified epidemiologists with college degrees, but who had found less than 5% in secondary infections, and expressly concluded, after reviewing almost 56,000 laboratory-confirmed cases in China, that it is clear, and this is a quote, "it is not clear whether this correlates with the presence of an infectious virus." In plain English, it's not an infectious disease. By March 15, 2020, however, when the nation's only physician serving as a state governor, Ralph Northam, had commenced his COVID-19 response, banning all non-essential social gatherings of 100 persons or more, there were only a little over 3,000 laboratory-confirmed cases in the entire United States. Much smaller than the 56,000 cases that were examined in China, and just 7 days before the Virginia Department of Health had issued a declaration of communicable disease of public health threat. 1 month before the first laboratory-confirmed case arose in any affected area within the Commonwealth, beyond his statutory authority. While just 7 days before that declaration, the CDC had confirmed what they attempted to describe as a case of human-to-human transmission of a communicable disease in the state of Washington. Specifically, a man who they had concluded had transmitted the virus to his cohabitating spouse. 2 persons living under the same roof for extended periods of time. But they concluded that it had to be a human-to-human transmission, a highly suspect proposition, and also far less evidence and empirical analysis than went into the study in China. At that point in time, Even scientists were baffled by the very first laboratory-confirmed case of infection in the United States, a traveler from Wuhan who had been infected in China, without a doubt, and had come into contact with as many as 68 close tracer contacts after arrival in the Seattle-Tacoma area, but had failed to infect even one. However, his unique virus was somehow found later to be the cause of at least 39 other cases in the state of Washington and could only have come from the same source. But these 39 cases had no connection at all to him. In the considered opinion of this former strategic counterintelligence professional, this anomaly can only be explained by a pathogen being deployed as a weapon of terror, and that those 39 others got hit with the same batch. On April 6, 2021, after receiving a FOIA request to inquire if Governor Northam and the Virginia Department of Health had ever considered if the COVID-19 causative agent had been, from the beginning, a biological weapon being deployed, or if they had later considered its potential for being weaponized, since they described it as a highly contagious disease, which would be very amenable to such a application. Attorney General Mark Herring coincidentally filed on that same day a motion to dismiss what had been the first filed and longest surviving litigation challenge to the lockdowns in the Commonwealth. And it was his claim that the sheriff for the city of Alexandria had never served his client in over a year with the summons or the complaint, despite a mandate from the circuit court for him to do so, implicating the sheriff and several other high officials in a string of felonies. That matter is now on appeal to the Virginia Supreme Court, but neither the governor nor the state attorney general has ever at any point acknowledged to the public or the press that the litigation even existed. However, it is in public record. All of this information is quite readily available in the open source environment, at least for those so inclined towards and capable of independent research, because you will not find it in your echo chambers on the news. And looking proactively toward the pandemic next time, please endeavor to exercise more discretion next time, because God sees everything, you know. This briefing was unclassified. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington Public School Board. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our schools. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Plenty of opportunity to figure out how to serve the Commonwealth veterans. Instead, he is using me of evading service simply like he will not exercise reasonable concerning the Commonwealth veterans. Mr. Webb, I'm afraid it's just far too little, far too late. I think that the service had to be effective within a year. I find that it hasn't been effectively made, so I'm going to enter the order dismissal of that.
All right, so you see, I got you. Maybe it's used.